Call this continued meeting, Board of Supervisors, this June 27th at 9 a.m. This is, of course, in reference to budget, consent agenda, and closed session for today. So moving on into public comments, I have several people who have signed up. There will still be opportunity to speak afterwards, after the last person on here. If you're an individual, please keep your comments to 3 minutes. If you're with a group, please, you are allowed 5 minutes. Going on to the first, and Mr. Reed is our timekeeper today. First person is Wisteria Johnson.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Wisteria Johnson from East District. I came forth this morning to briefly speak in behalf of using whatever extra money you have there, and my last figure was $999,000. Of course, I know it's changed to go toward the upcoming year's school budget. And while I'm here, I want to quickly thank Mr. Ernie Reed of Central District for initiating the idea. I want to also thank Mr. Robert Biden of the South District, who's a passionate educator. In addition, I want to thank Mr. Tommy Harvey for doing what he has historically done for the Nelson County school system. So I want to thank you, James. And I've pondered over the reason this decision was not unanimous. And I think that's the reason I'm speaking right now. To make a long story short, even if you just disagreed, it surprised me somewhat that there was no offer of any portion of that money to go to the school district. I mean, I don't know the government positions. I don't know the budgets in detail, but I know that you are a product of the school system. I know that even you served on some of the boards. And the only thing I can figure is that you just don't trust what the school system is going to do with the money. And if that's the case, you have the power of accountability. You can find out, okay? So that's what I needed to say on that. And I thank all 5 of you for your service to Nelson County. Last word, please support the Nelson County school system. Continue to support it, and as you've done in the past. And if there's extra money around, you know how the school system needs. Please supply it. It is the most valuable commodity, most valuable investment that we have here in the county. Thank you.
All right. Thomas Bergier.
Good morning. My name is Thomas Revere, 187 Jacks Hill Road. First thing I would like to do is congratulate Mrs. McGarry on her new position. I hope you treat her with respect that she deserves. I also would like to congratulate Steve Carter for the service he's done for 22, 23 years in this county. I don't think we could have done the things we have without his leadership. And served with him for 20 years, and he's certainly made a difference in this county. And he was a great favorite of mine. And I think while Candy was going to fill his shoes well, there's still big shoes to fill.
I agree with you.
On to the bigger things. The extra $1 million that was suggested that would be given to the school board, leaving zero for reoccurring money, I think is a mistake. I think we're setting ourselves up for a tax increase to cover any reoccurring costs. And historically, we've always given extra money above and beyond what the school board is needed. You look around the other counties, Nelson County has funded the school board more than they have, other local counties. And I think we should be proud of this. But I don't think in these times that we need to be going overboard. With reduced school populations, I just don't think this is time to give extra money there. Unfortunately, I have to leave, but I hope you make that decision correctly. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Mr. David Hill?
Good morning. David Hill, Sheriff of Nelson County. Today, to come before you this morning with some worries in mind. Most of the time, that's when you all see me. But the worries that I have today are in regards to our staff, our deputies, retention and recruitment of highly certified, qualified people. Many localities have stepped it up quite a notch to attract people to law enforcement because those folks that want to serve today are few and far between. Right now, looking at our roster in our office, there are 11 deputies that could easily go to another surrounding locality, making more money a year. And it's quite a big increase that they can make. Just south of here in Amherst County, they're starting to pay without any experience at all is $45,262. South of there, LPD, where the cost of living is much less than here in Nelson County, their starting salary is $50,000 a year, plus a $5,000 sign-on bonus. LPD is also offering a lateral transfer for those that are currently in the field for certified officers up to $61,588, plus a $5,000 sign-on bonus. North of here, our deputies could actually step down and go to work in the jail as a corrections officer. Their starting salary is mid 45, 46 range currently. The Albemarle PD, their current starting salary is $44,524 is what is advertised. Again, we have a good 10 to 11 people that could easily go to these localities. Right now, we have about 6 openings. 2 of those are in the school system. That is just an area that it's been hard to fill. You all have been gracious to give us those positions years ago. I'm very thankful. The community is thankful for those spots, but we cannot find qualified people to put there. So if there's anything at all you all can do before this salary study comes out and the results come out, it would be greatly appreciated. The state has for compensation board deputies effective July 1, those that are not currently making the minimum of $42,000, that will be the starting salary for the state paid positions. You all have always gone above and beyond and have supplemented, but at this point in time, there's more that's needed. So if there's some way we can brainstorm in the meantime, as Mr. Brugier stated earlier, it sounds like there's not a lot of money there, but if there's anything at all that we can do together with county administration, it'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all who I have signed up on the agenda this time. I will now open the floor to public who have not signed up. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak? Okay. Hearing no one else who wishes to speak for the public comments, I close public comments. Moving on to the consent agenda for the minutes of approval. As the chair's recommendation, we approve as presented. Do we have a motion? Motion for Mr. Barr, is there a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Harvey. Let's do vote by acclamation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions, objections? Hearing none, passes unanimously. Moving on to item number 4, FY23 budget. Ms. McGarry.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Before the board considers the budget adoption and appropriation resolutions, I was kind of asked just to provide a summary of where we started at the public hearing to kind of where we are now. So we had the public hearing on May 10th. The budget had included an increase in the transient occupancy tax up to 10%. This provided an additional 1.1 million in revenue. We had 1.5 million in new money to the school system. We had $881,750 of recurring contingency and $388,000 in non-recurring contingency. We also included a transfer of recurring funds of $2,010,000 to the debt service reserve to provide a $75 million debt capacity for future capital projects. So then after the public hearing, on the budget, we had a public hearing on the transient occupancy tax where the board, tabled consideration of any changes to that tax. So then we had to go back to the budget and take out the 5% that was included originally. And that was $1,150,130. The budget maintained the $1.5 million in new money to the school division. We then had to look at all of the recurring revenue in an aggregate way to see how to address the $1.1 million in transient occupancy tax that was to be taken out. So once that was done, we had a balance of recurring revenue of $1,609,619. And the board maintained a $610,000 transfer to the debt service reserve, which would provide a $54 million debt capacity. Had a recurring contingency at that point of $999,619 and non-recurring contingency of $388,000. All right, our next meeting on June 14th, which was the last regular board meeting, in discussing the budget, the board approved $2.5 million in new money to the school division, which reduced our recurring contingency to $0. We maintained a $388,000 in non-recurring contingency, and then also the $610,000 in recurring transfer to debt service reserve to keep that $54 million debt capacity. And there are just a few things I would like to share with the board. I know you all have thought a lot about the budget, but I just feel like it just really need to caution the board and think about how we can address some things going forward. With the majority of these new funding to the school division are salary-related items. So we really need to think about how that impacts the cost of the 5% raise that's in the FY24 state budget. You know, if you provide the $2.5 million for all of the salary-based adjustments they want to do, it's going to significantly bump up what that cost is going to be next year. I'm just concerned about how the board may address that going forward. Also concerned about how the board will address salary increases for county employees, either via a cost of living adjustment or the pay study adjustments for county employees that we're in the middle of doing now. There are also some equity issues between the minimum wage for school division staff and county staff if they raise theirs to $17 an hour. Also with zero in recurring contingency, how will the board sustain increases in economy-driven county operational expenditures such as fuel and utility costs, regional jail operational and debt service costs, solid waste hauling, given we're going to have some likely declines in our economy-driven revenues, such as the local sales tax, recordation taxes, transient occupancy tax, meals tax, and building permits. And just using fund balance to cover these recurring costs is generally not a recommended practice. Sheriff Hill spoke to this a few minutes ago. How will the board address current critical deputy and dispatch vacancy rates, which are at 24% for the sheriff's department and 42% in our dispatch center? And how will the board address costs of the new drug court once any grant funding received is exhausted? And we have additional operational costs that we need to consider associated with any new capital projects completed in the near future. So I'm just hoping the board, has considered all of these issues that we may face going forward from a financial perspective. I mean, I think everyone here wants us to have the best school division possible and to generate positivity and a good morale for everyone, but just think from a fiscal perspective, we need to just consider all of the things we might be facing going forward.
Great. All right.
So with that, this is the current budget adoption and appropriation resolution. That's the appropriation one, adoption one. these resolutions contain, everything I just mentioned, which is the $2.5 million in new money to the schools, a 0 recurring contingency, the $388,000 in non-recurring funds in the general fund budget, and $610,000 recurring transfer to debt service reserve.
All right.
So the board would need to adopt the budget first and then appropriate the budget.
Sure. You can have a seat for a second.
Sir?
I think one thing, this is a good point to discussion, as I've been cautioned by constitutional officers and county staff on what the future might hold if we pass this budget. And one of those items that is very important is, how do we support our staff? How do we support our deputies? How do we support our dispatch? How can we do all these things over the next 4 years? And the answer is we can't. That's just a fact. We can't increase the pay of the deputies. We can't increase the pay of dispatch. We can't pay any salary increases for, the county in the future. It's going to put us in a very tough spot. And I just think it's important that this cautionary tale be told before we make any motions. I know obviously since the budget happened, some members of the board did change philosophy when we were deciding revenue. From originally, we were doing $1.5 million to the school system, which is remarkable and a wonderful thing to do. And we had $1 million left over that we could use over the next 4 years for whatever other recurring expenses might exist or come up. And keep in mind, this board historically we usually try not to raise taxes. We really try not to. But as it's set up, we would have to raise taxes next year. And that would be a burden on those who are going into whatever this economic downturn cannot go to bear. Now, I don't obviously speak for necessarily the majority of the board, but these things are important. And if we do make a motion for all this, just know we will not be able to do anything else in terms of increasing recurring revenue unless we raise taxes. Anybody else want to discuss or have any comments?
Well, I do beg to differ, because we do have other revenues available to us to deal with the salaries and equity, which Ms. McGarry and others brought up really significantly. One of the recommendations that I had made is that we take it out of our non-recurring reserve, which is a possibility. I think there's about $9 million there. The other possibility is the debt service level that we have also included on the budget. Whether we need debt capacity to be able to borrow up to $75 million is something that the board has consensus on for this budget. But looking forward, when you look at the priorities, the salary levels is something that we're all deeply concerned about, and I'm really sympathetic towards. And those are areas that we could look at for revenues at this time. It's true that it is, as Candy brought up, that using non-recurring revenue is not a sustainable way to run the county, and I certainly appreciate that. But from the situation that we're in right now, I believe that we do have the ability to do everything that's in our budget right now, and also consider other salary increases that may not be in this budget now, but may be in front of us very soon, maybe sooner than when our study is available, or maybe at that time.
So, Mr. Reed, your suggestion is to use non-recurring money, our savings account, to go forward with any new recurring expenses.
Well, unless we were to, reduce our debt service in terms of this, of this budget, that's something that we could decide to do at any particular time.
Okay. Mr. Carr, I guess?
Well, I'm going to address, excuse me, a comment that was made earlier about the vote that was taken. And I think it would be enlightening and helpful for the public to either attend more board meetings or review prior minutes from the meetings, because I think the public may have forgotten that the reason we got to 1.5 in the first place was because we had two members at 500,000. We had two members at 3.4 million. And I negotiated with the board for us to come up to 1.5 million. So the thought that my last vote means I don't support the school system is disheartening to me as a board member, because I've dedicated the last 20 years of my life to Nelson County public service. And I support the school system wholeheartedly. So I do think, I like to look at this budget similar to how we look at our household budgets. And I think once we start in our households, we start accepting expenses that we know we're dipping into our savings account, you're dipping into your 401k or whatever you want to call it to pay your monthly expenses. I think all of us would agree that that's a bad position for us to be in our household. And for us to do that as a county, I think is bad policy for the taxpayers of Nelson County to start dipping into savings. We as a board have set priorities, and if we want to revisit those priorities of capital and debt service, that's another meeting. But we have all five unanimously agreed to the debt service and the priorities that we have for swimming pools or aquatic facilities or whatever different projects we have for the Department of Social Services building and different things like that. If we want to revisit those capital projects, we can, but we all agreed that those were things that were important for Nelson County moving forward. And I just think it's irresponsible of us to move forward with a budget where we know we're going to need to dip into our savings account to balance the checkbook. That's all I have to say.
Barton?
Yeah, the idea of we're incapable of raising salaries, the police department or other members of the government is misleading. There are two sources of revenue in order to meet those needs, and they should be met. However, to think that should be only should be on the schools doesn't. What we talked about before is the significance of the needs of the schools at this present time. And we can help that situation. And then later, it is not, we can dip into the capital. I mean, $75 million is not what we're going to spend on recreation. We have money available there to meet expenses that come in. And the capital, the savings account, yes, but there are times that it's necessary to reach into your savings account and to meet some of the dire needs of your community. And the most important members of our community are the children.
So I think one thing to mention, we don't have $73 million for ability to do things. We have a debt service capacity, which is $5,600,000.
Well, the capacity would be 54 million if you use the 610,000.
Right.
transfer to the reserve.
Right.
If you do not do that, you would have about 34 million, because you're still putting in the 2.3 million in one-time non-recurring money to get
Right.
34 million.
Right. It's a bad habit. Using your savings account and pulling money out like that is bad governance.
I'd like to address something here,
Sure.
if I might.
Go for it.
One of the things that we are committed to doing is working more closely with the schools and the school budget as we had than we perhaps have in the past. Given the amount of salaries that are committed for what we now have as vacancies and other vacancies that still need to be filled, is basically giving the schools an amount of funding now to be able to fill those vacancies. I think that it's most realistic to understand that that is actually, could be considered a savings account for the schools. They can draw into that to be able to fund themselves as best they can and to staff the schools as best they can. But what is most likely to happen is that many of those positions will remain unfilled. And at the end of the next fiscal year for the schools, they're going to have monies left over that that we had committed, that they had committed, that are unspent because of those positions not being filled. Now, in the past, we've had relationships with the schools that have not brought clarity to how that money's going to be spent. And I really do think that we have an opportunity here for the school, for the school budgetary system and for the county budgetary system to work more closely together. Because what that can do is it can provide money for the schools for the following year to roll over, which can either reduce or possibly flat fund the school for the following year, despite revenue increases. Now, the decision in terms of how that money gets spent is really one that the schools have the freedom and the autonomy to make. But working more closely with the county on how the revenues are being spent is something that that I believe is in the benefit of both the schools and the county, certainly with the monies going forward, because when, we're not taking this step lightly to, to increase the amount of money to the schools this budget. And it's going to be critical next year at this time, when we look back at this, to be able to say that we did the right thing last year. We did the best that we could for the schools, and they have been able to hold on to a significant part of that to be able to apply towards perhaps staffing next year or whatever the priorities are that the schools might have at that time, because it's really impossible to say what they would be. But, so I see this increased budget to do two things. One, to, of course, provide vital funds for school staffing for the coming year, but also to increase the relationship between the schools and the county going forth, to be able to determine the very best ways to go across to do this. And I've already, spoken to my comments on the recurring contingency and what that can mean. But I do think that, in giving the schools this additional funding, it also, puts puts something in the schools' ability themselves to fund themselves for the future. And that way, we're not looking only at ourselves. We're looking at the relationship and the combination of both the Board of Supervisors and the school board.
I'm sorry, are you?
Okay.
Okay. One thing, two comments I have. One, I might have misunderstood what you said, Mr. Reed, but this is what I took, and you tell me if I'm wrong. But I felt you were saying that you want to fund the schools, and then at the end of the year, any money left over, they could use it to, do whatever after that. But just make sure you're aware, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a school budget is a year-to-year budget, and it is illegal for a school system to carry over funds from one school year to the next. Is that correct? Yeah. has to revert back to the county. So it would become, our money at the, okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't
Yeah,
misunderstanding.
I
Okay.
understand that, I understand.
But one thing I do want to mention is, after our initial vote to increase the school budget to $1.5 million over previous year's funding, I was contacted by employees in the central office, school board members, and staff to thank us for that money that allowed them to do so much more than they would have been able to do if we didn't increase that funding to 1.5. And we were presented a balanced budget with raises, and a lot of things were accomplished in that budget after 1.5. We had public hearing, and everybody had a chance to discuss that. And I feel like at the last minute, this additional going to $2.5 million, spending all of our contingency. I said before, and bears repeating, I think it's reckless for us to spend all of that money and have to dip into savings to balance the budget, or raise taxes, or readjust priorities that we've all agreed on.
So obviously we have to, at some point, get into the actions on these items. I think us giving the $1.5 million, which we had budgeted for a long time ago, was already unprecedented and a great thing for us to do for the school system. We can still make any amendments if we want to, from $2.5 million to $1.5 million, or whatever that dollar number might be. Is there any interest in changing the $2.5 million to $1.5?
Most of what has been talked about today has been the negative aspect of the additional $1 million that we made available to the schools. And not enough about the thing that got us to make that additional $1 million, which was the crisis that exists within our schools and the schools across the nation. And that it was really significant that the board, in a 3-2 vote, at some pain and a way that really nobody wants to be. As I said many times, my whole life I lived on with no money in the bank. I know what it's like not to have any money. And I think we have to recognize the importance of doing what we had already done on the previous meeting, and making it clear to this community that we are willing to go out of our way to do what's best for the children. And I think we ought to think about that. It's not a bad thing we've done. It's a good thing we've done.
I want to go out of my way and make sure deputies have a living wage in this county. And I want to go out of the way and make sure that dispatch is getting the pay they so deserve for the emergencies that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. Us moving this direction leaves us no money to do that.
When I see, you're playing politics.
It's not
And
politics.
it
It's
is politics
budgets.
because, no one wants policemen and sheriff's deputies and people who work for the county to not get a fair living wage. I mean, I want to do that. I maybe, I want to step into that contingency money to get that money. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the children of Nelson County. We're talking about the school system. Now, it is political to bring in other aspects. Yes, we need to meet the needs that the sheriff talks about. We need to meet the needs of the people who work for this county. And based on some ideology or some philosophy that we refuse to recognize the needs of our children is not courageous.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move that we revert our budget figures to the level they were prior to the June 14th vote, that increased the school funding to $2.5 million, and revert to the original voted upon level of $1.5 million.
Okay, we have a motion from $2.5 million to $1.5 million to the school systems. Do we have support? There is a second for Mr. Harvey. Any discussion? Hearing no
Yes,
discussion.
I have some discussion here.
We have a Robert's rule vote?
We have a Robert's rule.
All right.
My understanding is that we cannot, this was a continued meeting today, and as a continued meeting, you cannot rescind a motion that you made in the same meeting. So,
We have not made a motion to approve. We've made a motion to amend. We have made a motion to change the original. So you would be approving this with that amendment, with that change, correct, Mr. Park?
I'm making a motion that we revert the funding to $1.5 million. Now, whether that's a new motion or an amended, I don't think I can amend a motion that's been approved. So it's a new motion.
Since we have our county attorney here, do you have any comments on this?
Well, I don't have our rules with me, but I hate to. You have a motion that was adopted, but not accepted for the current budget. If there's a motion to adopt this budget as presently stated,
With the change?
then there can be a motion to amend that budget.
So someone needs a motion to approve this, and then we get a motion to amend
A
it,
motion to amend, vote on the motion to amend.
and then that'll happen. Okay, so,
Way it goes.
Could they move to adopt the budget with the change to the school fund minus 1.5 or minus 1 million?
yeah, is there, I don't see any reason why we couldn't do that.
Yes, you do it that way too. You can move to adopt the budget. Amendment, Mr. Parks.
Okay. Mr. Parr, is that your motion?
Yes, I amend my motion as such.
All right, Mr. Harvey, you good with that? We have a second for Mr. Harvey. Any more discussion? Hearing no discussion, this will be roll call vote.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
I'm not clear what I'm voting for.
This is a motion to approve the budget, but with the adjustment from $2.5 million to $1.5 million to the school system.
No.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
no.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes. All right, so we have adopted the budget. So at this point, we need to appropriate the budget.
Okay, I'd just like to say that if the motion that was just approved is the equivalent of rescinding the vote that was previously taken, then I would like to say that I still believe that Robert's Rules does not allow that.
That was not my motion.
Okay. Do we have a motion to appropriate Mr. Parr's original budget adoption?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Harvey. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, let's do roll call vote.
Excuse me, wait. Just a moment to think. You know, I think it's important to think about what we're doing. You know, some of this money is already, was thought that would actually be appropriated, and we left this meeting on, a couple weeks ago with that impression. And obviously, I misunderstood what was happening because obviously there had been a plan that you would come to this meeting with this idea of being able to do this. which is disturbing to me, because as a member of the board, I would have been, thought I would have been, we would have talked about it. You might have come and we might have talked about what we're doing and reached some further compromise, which we still can do, I think.
Now, we've already adopted the budget. Now we're on
No, we already
appropriation.
said you can add an amendment.
We already approved the adoption officially.
Well,
So at
we
this
can
point, we're
amend it.
appropriating.
You've already amended what was going to be
The,
adopted.
that
so
would
we
have
can
been,
amend it again.
that's in reference to the
want to.
budget adoption that is already done. That vote has been cast, the budget's been adopted. We are now into the appropriation, which is the part where we appropriate this money as we accordingly to the prior motion. We're calling the question, so your
Well,
vote
I'm
is now.
saying, if we rejected this vote, now, if we came to no, then we could, let's say, add
All right,
half the money to the,
call the question. Mr. Barton, it is your vote. Yes or no?
no.
Continue, Amanda.
Mr. Harvey,
Yes.
Mr. Parr,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
No.
Mr. Rutherford.
Yes. All right, so adoption appropriation has been done. At this time, we will go on to closed session. Who's got a copy? Candy, is there anything you need to edit or anything at this time?
I'm sorry.
Is there anything you need to do to change?
I can go back and make the changes to the resolution
Tom,
as
why did you
adopted
change?
and appropriated and.
Why did you change
do that
that?
administratively.
All right,
Tom, why did you change your mind?
we're going into closed session.
As far as down the road, we could have done it a different way. Down the road, we never can afford anything.
Can we get it? What's that?
What were your reasons for voting yes in the first
What?
place? What were they?
I'd have to go back and look at it.
Yeah, we're gonna do that now. Yeah, we're trying to get to that point.
You feel it,
All right, let's get a motion to,
that certainly something happened after this.
all right, let's read a motion to go into closed session, if you could, Mr. Reed.
This is some
Put it right.
closed meeting material here.
Motion. What do you need, Mr. Harvey? You need a break? All right, Mr. Harvey needs to go to the bathroom, so we'll give it a minute. Couple minutes.